Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and good day to everyone. In this video, we discuss about bots and whisker plot. Really? Well, actually, this is the true bots and whisker plot, right? So this is an overview. The shape is more or less like a resistor or diode, I think, compared to bot and whisker. Never mind. Right. So in the box here, in the middle box, so the middle line here would be the median. So the left line here represent the first quartile. The right line here represent the third quartile. And then the whisker to the left will present the value until goes to the minimum value. And then suddenly it breaks somewhere here because there is a lower fence in between, and after the lower fence, if there is a value less than the lower fence, this value we put a dot and we label it as a outlier. So they also apply here to the right. So the whisker to the right until the maximum value just before the upper fence. So in between here is upper fence. So after the upper fence, if there is a value after that, so we plot as a dotted, and also we label that as a outlier, right? Right, next. What is the step to construct bots and whisker? So remember, previously we have a median, first and third quartile, right? So before we find out this value, first make sure that the data is arranged. If data is raw data, you have to arrange first and then find out the median. So I hope you already remember from the previous video how to find the median, the first and the third quartile. The formula is same as long it is a ungrouped data, right? So remember, for Q1 and Q3, you still have to find out S first and then determine whether it's integer or not, and then using that you determine the value of the Q1 and Q3. Okay, and then before we find the outlier, so make sure first you find out the interquartile range. So the interquartile range, I think, is supposed to be somewhere before the lower fence, because as you can see here, in order to find out the value of the lower fence and upper fence, so both of the have an interquartile range. So you have to find out the interquartile range first, right? Before we can substitute the value into the formula of lower fence and upper fence. So right away after the Q3, so we find out the interquartile range, that is Q3 minus Q1. Then later we find out the lower fence, that is the formula would be Q1 minus 1.5 times interquartile range, or we can put an acronym as an IQR, interquartile range. So same also for upper fence. So since the lower will be minus, so the upper fence will be plus. And then upper fence we will use the third quartile. So the third quartile will plus 1.5 times IQR also. Okay. Right, next. So this is the overview. So the minimum at the bottom and the maximum at the above. Okay. So this is the overview. So in between here, the box here itself will be the interquartile range. So the length of the line here, so depends on the lower and upper fence value. Right. And then maybe the question asks you to interpret from the box and whisker. So just take a look about the median line. if you saw that the median line is somewhere close to the middle of the box, then you can say that the box would be almost symmetrical. Okay, I think the most possible is almost symmetrical and not no skew or symmetrical skew. Okay, almost symmetrical. And then if you find out the larger one is on the right, so this one is larger, then remember we call skewed to the right. Okay, and then if you notice that the size of the left one is larger than the left, so make sure the conclusion will be skewed to the left. Okay, later on, when we discuss about the Pearson formula coefficient of skewness, there will be a better value, okay, whether it is slightly skewed, moderate skewed, or highly skewed. But using the box and whisker, we just got a rough overview. So we just stick to the in general, skewed to the left or skewed to the right. No need to mention about the degree of the skewness. So the degree of the skewness, slightly, moderate, and high, and that will be later on, okay, when we discuss about Pearson coefficient. So remember, right now for the box and whisker, if the question asks about the conclusion about the skewness, just mention about skewed to the left, skewed to the right, or if you notice there is almost at the center, just mention almost symmetrical. Okay. So next we move to the example. We have two examples here in this video to discuss how to construct a box and whisker. So this is the first set of data here. As you can see here, the data already arranged, okay, in the ascending order. So we just straight away find out the median. So before we find out the median, so I put the numbering, so we know that which observation that we need to look at when we find out the median and also the quartile. So for the median, we know that the n will be 12, so the median will be 6, right? So since 12 is a even, so to find the median, you have to find the average between 6 and 7. So between 6 and 7 observation will be 24 plus 26 over 2, that is 25. Okay. And then for the first quartile, so remember, as I said earlier, you have to find out first the S, because we want to determine which observation that we need to look at. So we find out the value of S first. So remember the formula in the previous video, nk over 4. So n is 12, k is 1 because it is first quartile, 1 over 4. So we find out the value is 3. So remember this 3 is an integer. So therefore, the first quartile would be the average of the third and fourth observation, okay? So third and fourth observation here means here 20 and 22, so correct. So 20 plus 22 over 2 would be 21. Then how about the third quartile? So right now the third quartile, so now k would be 3. So substitute into the formula of S, then we got the value of S would be 9. So again, this value is also an integer. So therefore, the third quartile would be the average of the mean and the 10 observation. Okay. So 28 plus 30 over 2, so it will be 29. Okay, our third quartile. And then remember, as I said earlier in the previous slide, before we can find out the fences, first you have to find out the interquartile range. Okay. So find out the interquartile range. So interquartile range would be the Q3 minus Q1. So that is 29 minus 21 from the first quartile. So the value of interquartile range would be 8. Then we can proceed to the lower fence. So remember the formula of the lower fence. What is the formula? From from the values here. Yes, the formula would be Q1, right? 21 here represent Q1. So Q1 minus 1.5 times A. So A here actually the interquartile range. So Q1 minus 1.5 times interquartile range. Okay. So the value of lower fence would be 9 here. Then for the upper fence, 29. So remember 29 here represent the third quartile, and then it is plus this time. So at the back is same, 1.5 times interquartile range. So this is the overview of the formula. Q3 plus 1.5 times IQR. So the value of the upper fence here would be 41. So check our value here. So the lower fence would be 9. So after 9 we still have 5 here. So the 5 here will be an outlier. And as you can see also 45 also, right? Because the upper fence here is 41. So after 41 we still have 45. So these two values, 5 and 45, this value we consider as an outlier that is outside the fence. Okay. So after we obtain all this value, then we can plot into our box and whisker. So remember to put a scale below here. So since the value is quite big, so the size of the scale will be 5, right? Okay. And don't worry, just sketch according to the scale, and then don't forget to label the value of the first quartile, the median, the third quartile, and also 10 and 40 is not the lower fence and upper fence. Okay, as you can see here, 10 actually the minimum value just before the lower fence. So same also 40 here. So 40 here also the value just before the upper fence. Okay, so 10 and 40 will be the minimum and maximum value before the fences. And then 5 and 45 here represent the outliers. Okay, so maybe you can label below here what is the value stands for. So remember, this is outlier, this is minimum, this is Q1, this is median, this is Q3, this is maximum, and this one is also outlier. Okay. Okay, next we have another example, example 17. So about the computer store. So this is the numbers of computers sold. So you have to illustrate and interpret the data by using the box and whisker. So remember, since the box and whisker, we are using the median and also the quartile. So first, before we can proceed to the finding the values, right, so let's see the solution here. As I said earlier, you have to arrange the data first. Okay, so we arrange the data first. And then also to make easier for us to determine the number of observations, so we label 1 until 12 observation. Then we proceed to find the median. So we know n is 12. So the n over 2 will be 6, right? So to find the median, you have to find the average between 6 and 7. So 25 plus 39. So this is 6 and 7. Over 2 will be 32. Then to find the first quartile. So for the first quartile, nk over 4. So n is 12 and k will be 1, okay, since it is first quartile. So s will be 3. So 3 is an integer. So the observation would be the average of the third and fourth observation. So this is third and fourth observation. So 13 plus 17 over 2 would be 15. Then same also for the third quartile. So for the third quartile, so now k would be 3. So after we calculate the value of s, the value would be 9. Again, this 9 is also an integer. And same as the first quartile, since it is an integer, you have to find the average of the 9 and 10 observation. So this is 9 and 10 observation. So this would be 43 plus 49 over 2. So we got the answer is 46. And then remember, after we find out Q1 and Q3, you have to find out the difference between these two. There is the interquartile range. So interquartile range will be Q3 minus Q1, that will be 31. Then after we find out the interquartile range, we proceed to find out the fences. So we start with the lower fence. So the lower fence would be, remember the formula here, Q1 minus 1.5 times interquartile range. So Q1 is 15 minus 1.5 times interquartile 31. So the value will be negative value. Well, never mind. The negative, that's the value that we get. You're not wrong. The value is correct, okay? The negative is true, okay? Is the correct value. Right, next for the upper fence. So now Q3 plus 1.5 times interquartile range. So we got 92.5. Well, as you can see here, the value of the lower and upper fence is too extreme, such that there are no values outside the fences. The lowest value here is 6 and no negative values. And the maximum value here is 62 and no value larger than 92 here. So in other words, in this case, we don't have an outlier. So we mentioned that it is none, means that no outlier in this situation. So after we find out all these values, then we can sketch our box and whisker. So this is our box. Remember, you have to label the 15 here represent Q1, the 32 here represent the median, and 46 here represent the Q3. So the 62 will be the maximum value and 6 will be the minimum value. Okay? Is that all? Not yet. You still have to interpret what that you get from the box and whisker. So remember, the median is 32, right? So we just mentioned that 50% of the data is greater than 32 because 32 is the median, okay? So half of the data should be greater than the median. And then secondly, we know that 15 is Q1 and 46 in Q3. So between Q1 and Q3 also 50%. So you can also mention that 50% of the data is between 15 and 46. Then we can also mention that outside there, so 25% is below 15, and also 25% also above 46. Okay. And then lastly, okay, as I said earlier, we can also predict our distribution, whether it is skewed to the left or to the right. But our assumption is quite rough. We cannot determine the correct value, unlike the Pearson coefficient. So I suggest you to remove the notation about the slightly here. Just mention skewed to the left, okay? Remember why we put skewed to the left? So it is because in our cases, the size of the left one here is larger, okay? So the larger one here is on the left, so we mention is skewed to the left. Okay? Right, I think that's all for this video. So thanks for watching. So remember, make sure you do the answer the question in the tutorial. And don't forget, in our next video, we will discuss about the measures of dispersion. And we start with the ungrouped data first. Okay? So stay tuned for that. Until then, thank you very much. Bye-bye.